Welcome back to the Donkey and the Bee with Brett and Laura Chotkevys, where we discuss all things marriage, entrepreneurship, and finances. We give you tips, we give you tricks, we give you tactics, we give you all sorts of things in regards to those three things and many more, actually. But yeah, welcome back.
All right. Well, I'm excited. This is our third or fourth episode.
Mm-hmm.
And man, we've been unpacking some things on money and kind of sharing our journey and how we got kicked off with that. And we're going to continue right along that, talking about the strategy we used to get our first real estate deal. And I think it's super important to talk to people about because people are intimidated by even just me saying, real estate deal or your real estate investment. It has this connotation of like, oh, that's 5-10 years from now, right? That's after I have all my ducks in a row. That's after I've paid off my bad debt and my college, loans, and I bought my first house and I fixed it up, and then I started saving for my kids' retirement, my kids' college fund, right? It's like It's like baby step 7. It's like, man, that sounds forever away.
Yeah.
And we did it. We were like freshly married, and we just did it a different way.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to talk about that today because I think it's really cool. And I think that this is what I want our girls to do, right? We're walking them through that now, buying their first rental property. So there's different tricks and techniques that are pretty common, right? It's called house hacking. And we did our first house with this house hacking method. And we talked to some of our friends, some of the people that work with us at Platinum, like, hey, I know you're saving for your first house, but let me show you this other way to do it. Let me show you how to house hack. Let me show you how you can get your first deal done and set up your first investment property. Mm-hmm. And it's not that hard. It's so we'll talk through it today, but it's a fantastic way to go to set yourself up, whether you're young in your 20s or whether you're in your 40s and 50s, but you still haven't have any investments yet. Like, this is how you can start.
Yeah, I think the first word that people think of when they hear buying a house is risk. So I think risk, in our culture is viewed as a negative thing. And so I think that we viewed it as kind of a positive thing, which is why we took action toward that. So I think now, knowing what we know, it wasn't really a risk because we knew that it was going to appreciate and it was going to have so much value down the road. And so now when we purchase properties, we know that. And so I think telling people now, if we would have had the Donkey and the Bee when we were first purchasing our property, we probably would have done differently. So actually, when Brett and I were talking about this, we were like, man, I wish somebody would have told us to do this instead of this. And so I'm hopeful that you'll get that golden nugget today of like, wow, I can do this. And, yes, there may be a little risk, but I know on the back end of it is so much reward.
Yeah. And I think this is really what jump-started us into our financial freedom journey. It got us started in real estate. And I think that this is the best way for people to get into it because I guess we'll unpack it soon, but it's not that scary. It's not like you need a ton of knowledge, right? Mm-hmm. Like, well, I guess we can get into it here, but so let's talk about house hacking. Do you want to start? What is this? What do you do? How does this work?
So we may have a different, definition of house hacking. But I define house hacking as purchasing a property. You have a primary loan as, your finance for that. You purchase it, you get into it, you fix it up, and then you sell it 2 years later. That's what we did. But there's also another avenue of purchasing a duplex or a quadruplex under that same type of loan, where you live in one and then you have an income producing property out of that other one or other 3 properties under that. And then same thing, you can fix each one up, rent them out, and then potentially you could take that income and then purchase another asset, or you could sell it and then purchase a bigger asset. So that's how I define it.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to add anything to that or if that's...
Well, I think some of the key factors here is you're going to buy a property, but you're buying it as your primary residence, right? So that's the key component. It's not an investment property. It will become an investment property, but it is a primary residence. So you can get a primary residence loan, right? You can get a FHA loan. You can put as little as 3.5% down, right? You can get a VA loan. And these things you can do on a single family, but you can also do it 1 to 4 units. So you can literally buy a duplex and live in one and rent the other. You could buy a 4-unit building and you could live in one apartment and rent the other 3 out. And nobody told us that when we were getting into this, right? We did it where we bought a single family residence and we lived in it, right? We had our primary residence loan. We went FHA, 3.5% down. And so it was really reasonable for us to save a down payment. And it didn't take that long. But what I really like about this is, we were still in college. We were still waiting tables and didn't have any real income. But we were able to qualify for this because, you still need to pay rent, right? Like if we moved at an apartment and bought this house, you still have to make that mortgage payment. So there's difference between your mortgage payment and your rent may be the exact same, right? You may already be qualifying and hitting these ratios on your debt to income ratio. So the difference in your mind between I'm going to buy a rental property or my first investment property, like, well, I have to cash flow, I have to have this amount of reserves and these things, like that's not what we're talking about here. It makes it so much easier if you can say, hey, I'm going to buy this house as a primary residence. I'm going to live in it. But then after that, right, at some point, I'm going to change the deal and it's going to now be an investment property. I'm going to move out of it, right? I'm not going to live there for the 30 years or whatever it is. I'm going to buy this place, fix it up or whatever I'm going to do with it. And then I'm going to rent it out after that. And I may move out and buy another place, or I may just rent a place because this cash flows. Now we did that with one, right? But if somebody would have told us back then, I mean, we thought we were smart. We did it with one. If someone would have told us, Brett, just do this with 4, right?
Exactly.
Like, man, we were already sacrificing. We moved into a fixer-upper. We moved into an area that was a little bit
not safe.
safe. We couldn't send our kids to the schools there, right? That it was not good schools. But so we were already sacrificing. We were already coming from this mindset of let's buy something because we know it's going to appreciate in value. We know it's going to go up. We actually bought a fixer-upper because we knew that we wanted to fix it up, that we wanted to gain that equity. So we thought we were kind of working the system. We were pretty smart about it. And we were, right? It got us started. And man, I would just say, man, if someone would have told me I could buy 4 units, wow, that's a huge difference because potentially you're going to have a bigger purchase price, right? And 4 units is probably more expensive than a single family residence. Now, you're going to rent out the other 3. And if you have an income of $1,000 a unit, you're going to live in one. That's 3 extra units there. That's an extra $3,000 of income. And that can go to your debt to income ratio, right? Meaning like the bank's going to look at that and say, oh, well, I see Brett and Laura, you make this and your expenses are this. So, here's your income, your debt to income ratio. But then you're going to supplement that with there's an extra $3,000 you're going to bring in from those other 3 apartments. Now, it's kind of case by case with whether or not that lender will use that or not. But the principle is still the same, that you are really working the system there, setting yourself up to buy a 4-unit building or a duplex or a triplex, right? And using the tenants to pay a large part of that mortgage, or they may cover the entire mortgage, right? That is fantastic opportunity. And really what I love about this, you're going to, now you can do this because you have to live in it as your primary residence.
But how long? I was going to say,
1 year.
Long?
That's
exactly,
it. 1 year.
Yes.
Okay. You only have to live in it for 1 year. Now, we were coming at it from this perspective of we are going to sacrifice. We are already moving to a neighborhood we didn't really love, but it was what we could afford. And we knew we were only going to be there for a few years because we couldn't send our kids to the schools there. So we'd have to transition at some point, but we couldn't afford that transition yet. So it allowed us to get started. And we were already coming from the mindset of like, hey, let's move where we don't really want to be, but where it's a good financial decision for us. So why don't you take that same mentality and just say, okay, well, I might live in a place where it's a little bit expensive and a 4-unit or a duplex doesn't necessarily make sense or cash flow, I can't afford it. But 30 minutes away or on the other side of the county, right? Like, heck, if I only have to live in it for a year, I can make that sacrifice. We can get on the same page about that and just commit 1 year to driving a little farther to work. And then we're going to live there and we're going to fix up these units one at a time. We're going to live in one. Well, as soon as one becomes vacant, we're going to fix it up. And then we're going to raise the rents and bring somebody else in. And we're going to repeat that cycle. And then potentially we got a fourplex that is cash flowing, and we've moved out, and maybe we buy a new place, or maybe we don't. Maybe we just rent something while we now have our first 4-unit building. And that is a huge deal for most people. Most people, they're lucky to get 1 or 2 rental properties, let alone starting in their first opportunity with a multifamily, duplex or fourplex.
Yeah, I think the biggest roadblock that I can think of, at least for people, is the first, like I mentioned, risk. And second is I don't want to have renters. I don't want to be in charge of renters, or I don't want to drive far. And I think it's all these small little roadblocks that we put up in our own minds that, like, it's such a small deal. It's so small in comparison to the gain you're going to have after this. And so I think it's like just pushing them to the side and being like, forget this. I'm going to sacrifice for 1 year. Yes, it's going to suck. Yes, I may drive farther. Yes, I may have to deal with a few crappy renters, and that's okay. It's part of the game, right? It's all part of the game. And so I would say to those individuals like, oh yeah, I'm not going to drive 30 minutes away, or I'm not going to do that. Like, it's 1 year. It's 1 year. Okay. So I just want to reiterate that, because I feel like there's a lot of excuses that get kicked around in your own mind. And even with your spouse, I'm sure, saying, oh, but babe, I don't want to drive 30 minutes away to work. That's going to be too much gas money. Think of the gas money, like stupid excuses like that. Come on, kick those to the side and just think of your future here and your kids' future as well.
Yeah, for sure. So I think for us, we came at this from the perspective of, we are young, we have goals, we're building wealth, we're getting on the same page, we're trying to figure out some type of plan. And we decided up front that we're not going to buy the dream home, right? We are not going to get the perfect neighborhood, the perfect house. We're going to really buy something because it's a future investment. We're living in it now, right? Right now, it's not really an investment. It's costing us money every month. And we spent the first 2.5 years on a $500 a month budget fixing up our first house, right? But we came at it from this perspective of, this is the jumpstart. This is the foundation for us. And we're not going to go the middle-class mindset on this. We are not going to buy the house in the suburbs that we're going to fix up and then sell, and then take that equity and roll it into a more expensive house. And we're not going to do that house jumping, right? We want to be house hacking, which is the exact opposite direction of house jumping, right? Building that equity, selling it, buying a bigger house, building the equity, selling it a few years later, getting into the better neighborhood, all that kind of stuff, where it's like, oh, okay, I'm going to keep scaling up and increasing my debts and my liabilities, so that eventually 10 years from now, I can have this big, beautiful house in the nice part of town where everyone looks at what I have and they're envious, right? Like, we didn't want to do that. That was the exact opposite path, right? We wanted to sacrifice, and we took that opportunity to say, okay, well, we're going to buy this house not because it's in the right location or it's next to the bougie, Whole Foods, or have the great schools, because it didn't have any of that stuff, but it was at a discount. We bought a property that needed a full cosmetic rehab, but it wasn't destroyed. Like, we could get a primary loan on it. And then we did it ourselves. And we knew that this was going to be our start. And we came together, and before we bought this, and said, like, hey, I think this is a strategic way for us to build our finances and use this as an opportunity to get our first real estate deal. Because otherwise, like, this idea of investing in real estate just seems so far away. If you're going to go the opposite direction and you're going to say, okay, I'm going to save and I'm going to get, my 20% down or 5% down or 10% down, and I'm going to buy a house that I want to live in, right? In the right neighborhood with the right schools and the right size. And I'm going to save to do that. That's a big, daunting task already. Then you say, okay, well, now I'm, in this middle-class mindset, I'm going to be keeping up with the Joneses. I'm going to go and I'm going to remodel the kitchen, remodel the bathrooms, put in a pool eventually. I'm putting in tons of money into this house that I'm really just going to sell in the future so that I can repeat this cycle. And then where is my investment money? Where is the money that I am actually putting towards my future to make babies with this money, right? Like, we recognized up front that, okay, if we go down this other path of buying the right neighborhood and jumping up from then when are we ever going to be able to invest? When are we ever going to get rentals? So I think both of them have a starting point, but they're going totally opposite directions. And I think what allowed us to grow our wealth was to make this commitment and go the opposite direction, right? Away from the middle class mindset, away from the norm in society of I'm going to accumulate more debt. Now we have debt because of that, but it's good debt, right? It's debt that cash flows.
Yeah, I think that's the difference, is determining the good debt versus bad debt. And there are some people out there that say all debt is bad. And I completely disagree with that stance. I think that we leveraged or utilized our debt to create more wealth for us. And so it's not like we have debt in like credit cards. We don't even have credit cards. So I think that's something that is beneficial to us, is we don't just randomly spend money all the time and rack up debt on credit cards or buying ridiculous liabilities. So we have debt to purchase more liabilities. And so in turn, that creates more income monthly for us, and in turn creates more money that we can spend on more assets. And so I think it's just kind of a silly concept personally to say that you cannot purchase a property until all of your debts are paid. I think that that's going to be so far down the road, especially if you're making, less than $120,000 a year and you're told that you can't purchase anything until your house is paid off, which doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. And so we're kind of throwing rocks at a few people's views here, because I think that people think that they can't invest in real estate until they're hit a certain point financially, or until they hit a certain point without debt. And I think that's completely wrong. I think you can start as soon as, even if you have college debt or whatever it may be, you can still purchase a property as a primary residence or multiple properties and rent those out, create an income for yourself, and then have that be your first catapult into your investment journey.
You're totally right. And I just want to, I guess, just hit on the opportunity that is here to do this, because you can literally put 3.5% down, or if you're a veteran, 0% down, and buy both of these opportunities, right? These loan programs with very little down. You can do 1 to 4 units. And again, you can use the income from those rental, right? If you have 2 or 3 or 4 units, you can use that income to supplement it, meaning then that you can buy a more expensive property. And just because, we may not at that point have qualified for $1 million fourplex, we now may be able to qualify for $1 million fourplex, because now we have an extra $3,000 a month of income coming in if we had 3 apartment buildings at $1,000 a piece. So it really bumps up your buying potential if you're able to use the income from other people. And now, you only get one opportunity at this, right? Like, it has to be your primary. You can only have one primary residence. So as soon as you go and buy something, that potential is gone. Now you can't go do this deal this way again, right? With this high leverage of the 3.5 and using that. So that's why I think people should do this. They should jump on it, right? I wish our girls were 18, because let's go find a fourplex for them, right? And they can each buy one.
So then I guess maybe explain the difference, because again, I don't necessarily have like a huge finance mind, but can you explain to people what that means? I think maybe people who are new to the show or just new to learning about money and finances and investing may not understand what you're talking about when you say that's your only opportunity, or primary residence loan. What does that mean?
Yeah. So I think of it like this then, right? Like you're gonna declare something as your primary residence, and you can get a loan for, typically 20% down, or there's 10% or 5% down programs, right? But in addition to that, there's FHA or there's VA. There's some other programs out there that you can utilize if it is your primary residence. You can only have one of these type of loans at a time. So if you already own a house that you live in and it's your primary residence, and you went conventional on it, you can't go buy another property with FHA, because you already have a primary residence. You need to have this opportunity be your primary. So I would say start with this, because it is a program that allows you to buy a property sooner, right? Because you can save less, because you only need a smaller down payment. So it is a perfect opportunity to get started, and you do it first, and then you can use this to kickstart yourself, and then that you've kind of outgrown that opportunity. But some people may miss this opportunity, or they'll use it as their actual primary residence that they want to live in for 10 or 20 years. And I would say that is going the wrong direction. It's that steps towards the middle class mindset of, I'm going to use this opportunity. It's great that they're doing it to buy a house, but they could use that opportunity going the investment strategy instead of buying the primary residence strategy.
Yeah, exactly. So I think for me personally, what would help me understand more is if we actually throw some numbers out there and see break them down so that people can understand what this means. So say, let's see, what's the best example? Like what's a good purchase price for a fourplex?
So let's see.
I know it's dependent on where you live.
Yeah, it's depending on where you live. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's call it $150, $150K per door.
Okay.
So $600K.
Okay.
And again, if you're somewhere expensive, it's going to be much more than that, but there's places plenty cheaper than that. So if you wanted something that will cash flow, right, you're probably going to need to be in that, 100 grand per door to 200 grand a door to have it cash flow after you are renting them out.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So say for our example, when we purchased our first house, we purchased it for a certain amount. How do you know that's a good deal? You know what I mean? Like say if someone's never purchased property, they don't even know anything about real estate. They're overwhelmed by the thought of it. They don't know how to comp properties, meaning you pull comparable sales in the area and you see if that's a good price or not. Like, so I guess if someone's out there listening and they're listening to this, like, yes, I want to do that. Okay, but now what? Like, what's the first step?
For sure. Okay. So I think you need to identify what your strategy is here. Is it one or is it four? But either way, at the end of this, right, you're gonna buy it. You're gonna have to live in it for at least a year. Then what are you going to do? Are you going to rent it or are you going to sell it and take that equity and then do it again? Now, I guess for your example here, we're talking about renting it. So whether it's one or two or three or four, it's the same principle. You're going to identify what your mortgage payment is going to be, and that payment you have to make every single month, right? So count your PITI, all of your principal, interest, taxes, insurance.
I was just saying you have to say what PITI means.
Man.
Okay,
I knew you were going to tell me,
know,
so I did it. Okay, so that's the money that's going to be coming out. Now, what's the money that's going to be coming in? Okay, so obviously the money coming in has to be bigger than the money going out, right? That's the simplest way to look at it. Mm-hmm. Now, what percent does it need to be bigger by? Is it 20% bigger, right? So if you're having a payment of $1,000 a month, you need to have $1,200 coming in, and then you have 20% extra above that. Mm-hmm. So consider these different things. Like, it'll be kind of case by case per market. Like, are you going to have a hard time renting these? Or is there going to be more vacancy? Are you going to property manage it yourself? Or are you going to pay a property manager? Is it a beat up place where there's going to be a lot of repairs that are needed? Or are you going to fix it all up and make it nice and pretty and it'll be all good? Mm-hmm. So I think the more volatility with the market and the property, you would want a higher percentage of an overage. If it's a very stable property, meaning it's not going to have very many repairs, and a stable market or location where you're not going to have a lot of volatility with tenants, and they're not going to turn every 6 months, they may be there for 5 years, you're not going to have a lot of vacancy, then you can potentially have that as a lower amount. But really, you're just kind of tracking two different numbers here, the money that's going out and the money that's coming in. And the money that's coming in simply needs to be more by a given percentage. And I think 20% is a great way to start, but maybe, adjust that up and down based on how stable you think the property will be.
Mm-hmm. And so as far as having a management company, what is the percentage of what a management company normally takes, and what is it taking it from? Is it taking it from the net? Is it taking it from the gross? So you want to explain that? Yeah.
So for us, for the management company that we have, so they set up all the leases, they do all the tours, they find your tenants, they vet them. And after they move them in, right, the deposit goes to the management company. They have a bank account for all these things, and there's an online portal, so you can see all the income and everything that's going on there. Income comes into them. They're going to take their fee, and then once a month, at least for us, they draft it into my bank account. So therefore, whatever their fee is, and it could be per door, right? I've seen, $80 a door, $100 a door, or I've seen a certain percentage, whether it's 8% or something like that. Mm-hmm. So those are numbers you're going to want to put in on the front side, unless you're going to do it yourself. But
I would suggest doing it yourself. I don't know if
Why?
It's your I think because if it's your first rental, I don't know. I think that taking that percentage, if it's 8 to 10%, that's kind of a lot. Personally, if it's your first rental,
yeah,
I feel like you should vet the renters and you should learn all the ins and outs in it. And personally, that's me. I feel like you need to know the ins and outs of it. Granted, there are a lot of other individuals who don't want to know the ins and outs of it. They'd rather have someone else take care of it. And I think that if you have enough income coming in for that, then I think that's fine. But I don't know. Personally, I like knowing what's going on. I like to know the process of things. I want to know if things are getting taken care of, if they're not. That's just personally, that's me.
Yeah.
So.
I think you can go either way with that. I don't like doing it myself. We have property management companies that do it. But I've done it myself, and it's really annoying when you get calls and emails.
Yeah, but you've learned it, right?
Okay, but
and
I
you're
know the
past
process.
it now. Yes, you're past that learning process. So I think initially it's good to learn it and then pass that along after you've learned it, so that you can't be snaked by these management companies when they're calling you and like saying certain things, and you're like, that's not right. What are you talking about? So at least you kind of have an understanding of the process, and you can be standing up for yourself in a way.
For sure. So yeah. On management companies, there's not a lot of good ones. The good ones are very hard to find.
Yes.
So yeah, you should maybe go and learn it and ask around or on some local groups who are some of the local handymans. You have them as people in your back pocket that you can call for these kind of things.
Mm-hmm. So with finding the deal, I think for us, we didn't have any real estate experience when we first bought our house. We were just, I don't even know why to be honest, I don't even know how we got this in our minds that we wanted to purchase a house. We were so young and we were just waiting tables, but we just had this dream of purchasing a fixer up and fixing it. So I don't know, it worked out. But if you don't have that background in real estate, you don't have the understanding, like I said, of comparables. Do you realtor route? Like what would you say people should take?
Yeah, I think that I think one of two ways. I think you definitely need a realtor involved, but maybe not quite on the very, very beginning. Maybe do some basic research yourself. And if you're gonna do some basic research, I like to use Redfin. And because Redfin, you can like highlight a neighborhood, right? And you pick this area, and then you can sort it by price per square foot. So specifically, if you're looking for a fixer, or if you're looking for something that's going to cash flow, obviously price per square foot's a good thing to look at. So that's what we did, and we're able to find some, at least in this specific market, like I can compare apples to apples. It's this one zip code, it's this one area not crossing, big major thoroughfares and stuff. Like, okay, let's just look at what's the cheapest at this square footage versus everything else.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Perfect. So we did that as well. We had a realtor that helped us maneuver the entire process of purchasing a property, which was like overwhelming to us in the beginning. And so I think it's important to read all those documents and know what's going on. But then we kind of moved on, and we were purchasing properties that were far away from us. So would you suggest that people look outside of like an hour away? Like if they live somewhere and maybe it's cheaper if they purchase an hour away, would that be still a good route to go as well?
I think that you may be getting onto a different category of investing that's not the house hacking model.
Okay.
Because if you're house hacking, you have to have it as your primary, right?
Yes,
So you're going to have to live there. So
Yeah.
again, we talked about like, I would have driven 45 minutes extra to work to have this opportunity and grind it out for a year and then transition and do something different. But after we got our feet wet and we started investing in real estate, we moved our market, 4 hours away, and we built a team up there, and I would drive up there once a week, but we weren't using this purchasing method when we did that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Well, is there anything else you want to add to this topic?
I do. There's one last thing. And I think when we did this, we bought our first house. So we owned it for about 2.5 or 3 years. We fixed it up, and then we sold it. Right. And for us, so we bought it in 11, we sold in 14. So the market was appreciating that whole time, right? We had a good amount of equity that we built. So to continue this commitment to ourselves of going down the path of the financial freedom path, as opposed to the other path of the middle-class mindset, right? We had a bunch of money in the bank. Now we had the ability. Now we sold this house. We could have gone FHA again and 3.5% down and bought something, or 10 or 20% down, and we had a huge down payment now because we sold that house. We chose not to do that. We chose not to buy the big beautiful house in the great neighborhood where our kids could go to school and do these things. We chose not to go that path. We instead sold that house and rented. We actually rented for the next 7 years. And lived in houses that were, they were fine houses, but they weren't like our own, right? Like we were always annoyed with the paint color in the backyard and landscaping. And we were those people that like, okay, we're gonna commit to continue to sacrifice. And so it was the first decade of our marriage that we did not have a primary residence that we chose for ourselves. That was the best fit for our family. And we did that intentionally. We made that commitment to each other. So we rented in areas that were good schools and our kids can go to school, and they were fine houses. Safe and everything, but we use that money to start our investing journey. Right now, this is where we talked about how we built our investment company and we started buying in other areas because it cash flowed over there. So we use that money to be able to start purchasing properties, learning our niche, learning markets. And again, we lived in a market where it didn't really work. We were in Orange County, California, where the minimum house is like $1 million and none of that stuff cash flowed. And it's just not realistic, right? So we drove 4 hours away once a week to go look at houses and check on our contractors and do all that kind of stuff. But it was this commitment between ourselves as a married couple to say, okay, we are putting aside this normal journey of buying the house, fixing it up, selling, buying a bigger house, fixing it up, selling, buying a bigger house, until you get to the point where now you have $1 million in debt and this big fancy house. And it's like, well, I don't really want that, right? I want the passive income. I want to be able to choose by the time I'm 40 whether I want to continue working or not. I want the freedom to quit my job and hang out with my kids and travel and do these things. And it was really an agreement that we had that we were going to continue to sacrifice. So it was only a few years ago that we were able to purchase a house for ourselves. That was like, here's really a house that we want for ourselves, and we're going to remodel it for what we want. And really, we were kind of reaping the rewards of those first 10 years of our marriage, finally, after a good amount of time.
So when you're talking about that, it makes me think of the cultural pressure, I would say, of owning your own home. Because I remember there were so many parents that I would talk to, or neighbors or anything, when they found out that we rented. It's like an automatic, like, oh, you rent. It's so weird. Actually, now that I think about it, it was almost like people would judge you based on if you rented or you owned. And I think this is the driving force for people to purchase properties bigger every time, because it's like that. It's instilled in us, I think, that we have to own it. You can't be renters. Like, oh my gosh. So it's almost like frowned upon. And maybe that was just because we were in Orange County and that's just kind of the persona a lot of people have. But I think that's the main driving force to the reason why people don't want to rent. It's because it has a negative connotation.
For sure. Especially all the moms when you're dropping off the kids at school. Man, those moms can be a little tough.
So again, put that to the side, because you actually are thinking about your future and your family's future and your kids' future more than just what your neighbors or your friends or whatever thinks, right? That doesn't matter. Those people's thoughts and opinions, it doesn't matter. So don't make financial decisions based on what other people are going to think about you, which I think majority of us do, right? So this being an important aspect of, like, it's a home, and we look at it as an investment, not really a home. Even our home now, I feel like, is kind of an investment for us. Like, it's not like our perfect dream home and that we're going to be in it forever. It's kind of an investment. And so maybe we just have that different mentality of real estate is an investment. And so put those negative thoughts to the side of all the people that are going to be inundating you with all of those ridiculous statements. So I just wanted to add that in.
Awesome. Well, I think that if this got you thinking, right? If you haven't had a conversation with your spouse about this kind of topic yet, and you have this opportunity, or you have this drive to, like, I haven't bought my first rental property yet, then have this conversation and just explore these options, because there's a huge opportunity with this house hacking model to get started. Not necessarily on your first primary, but on your first, like, investment on a series of investments, and go down the opposite path. So you got to get on the same page, have the conversation, and make some goals and dreams together.
And anybody can do it. Doesn't matter how little, quote unquote, money you think you make, you still can do it. It's still attainable, and you don't have to pay everything off to attain it. So I hope everyone understands that and knows that, and gets out there and just gets after it.
All right.
Well,
good. Well, thank you for joining us with the Donkey and the Bee, and we will see you all next time.